should we be aggressive or passive? Advocate for abolition or welfarism? Should we champion big specific asks or smaller attainable ones like Meatless Mondays? These are some of the questions Casey Taft seeks to answer in his book on vegan advocacy. But who is Casey Taft and why should you care? Well, beyond being a psychiatry professor at Boston University, he's developed the only effective domestic violence prevention program for military populations. And he did so using peer-reviewed, randomized controlled trials. Basically, the gold standard of scientific research. But what does domestic violence have to do with veganism? Taft writes this: "I've seen thousands of violent, angry patients who come to me with no intention of changing and who resent me for even suggesting that their behavior is problematic. Most are court-ordered to see me, so they're not asking for help. They engage in many of the same types of justifications that we vegan advocates encounter when interacting with non-vegans: minimization of the impacts of the violence, refusal to take personal responsibility, and extreme hostility that often results from the guilt and shame over one's actions." So based on his years of hands-on and research experience, what does he suggest? While some people have argued to just be as vegan as possible,
part of being a vegan ally is to really be as vegan as possible. This is the only rational ask.
Or do your best, or do Meatless Mondays, Taft remains unconvinced. As he points out, one of the first things that any clinical psychologist will discuss with a new client is long-term goal setting. A therapist would never set a long-term goal of ending only some violence. And in fact, there's already a widely studied and empirically supported theory known as goal-setting theory, which posits the opposite. Asking someone to do their best leads to less behavior change, while specific and difficult goals lead to greater behavior change. So given this research and our end goal, it seems rational to put forth a clear, specific ask at both the personal level, veganism, and the societal level, abolition. And one more thing to add here is that to ask for less when it's not really what you want or what you believe in is to be fundamentally dishonest with your conversation partner. If we want authentic interactions and authentic relationships, they can't be built on half-truths regarding our philosophy and values. Now, what about aggressive versus passive? Militant versus pick-me? Well, the truth is this is just a false dichotomy, because there's a third option. Aggressive and passive approaches each suffer from their own failings. Aggressive approaches that are hostile or attack the person, tend to put people on the defensive and may induce a classic shame response.
Do you think you know better than me?
As Taft writes, feelings of shame can prevent one from truly taking a personal inventory and thinking about how their behavior may be harming others. When one is shamed, they will be more likely to irrationally defend themselves and lash back out. Passive approaches, on the other hand, just don't communicate a clear vegan message. They attempt to spare people any sort of discomfort, and as a consequence, they aren't useful for actually resolving an issue. This concept of unhealthy and unproductive communication styles is also explored in the book Crucial Conversations, with the handy mnemonic, silence and violence. And yes, I also recommend this book for vegan advocates and anyone looking to get better at difficult conversations. So what's the third choice? An assertive approach.
If there was one kind of skill I could convey to every vegan on the planet, it would be assertiveness.
To be assertive simply means to express oneself in a manner that is respectful of the other person, but also respectful of oneself.
So to be assertive means to find that middle ground between being passive or aggressive. And assertiveness doesn't necessarily mean agreeing with other people. Assertiveness is really being clear, and sometimes it may mean setting really kind of firm limits on other people and what you find is acceptable.
You respect the other person by not resorting to name-calling and overt hostility, and you respect yourself by expressing your position and needs straightforwardly instead of bottling them up or sugarcoating the message. Disrespecting the other person will harm the relationship, and as Taft says, it has repeatedly been shown in clinical psychology literature that the bond between the change agent and the change target is a stronger predictor of therapy outcome than the specific approach used. So the relationship you foster is going to be more important than the rhetorical angle you take in the conversation. But what do passive, aggressive, and assertive responses actually look like? Well, here's some abbreviated examples from the book. Imagine someone says this to you: "I have a lot of respect for vegans. I could never do it though. I just love cheese too much." A passive response would look like this: "Well, veganism isn't for everyone." While an aggressive response might look like this: "Did you know that mother cows are raped and baby cows are killed for your precious cheese? You are beyond selfish." The first response is passive because it doesn't advocate for veganism when the opportunity presents itself. And the second response is aggressive because it attacks the individual. So what's the assertive response? Taft offers this: "Of course you could do it. After you've been vegan for a month or so, you won't even miss animal foods. If you ever find yourself in a moment of weakness and need motivation, just think about the calves who are taken from their mothers at birth." This is assertive because it offers encouragement rather than insulting the person, while also highlighting the animal cruelty and exploitation they're complicit in. Now, of course, there's a spectrum as to how a response will be categorized. So for contrast, let me highlight a response from an online activist which lands further along the continuum towards aggression, but I think ultimately still falls under the assertive rubric. They say, "Whether a cow has her throat slit to be eaten in pho or a Big Mac, the result for her is the same. A person's culture makes no difference for the individual being oppressed and slaughtered. Does living in a way where you refuse to force slaughter on innocent beings seem aligned with your values? While this doesn't offer encouragement, it doesn't insult the person. It speaks plainly about the issue and it centers the victim. Now, depending on tone, the last sentence could read as either condescending or encouraging genuine introspection. And for those reasons, I think this does lean more towards aggressive than the previous example. But ultimately, it still strikes me as assertive. So be assertive, be clear in your message, communicate veganism and abolition, and don't apologize. But this only scratches the surface of the book, so if you're at all interested in vegan outreach, I highly recommend picking this up as it's a very short and actionable read. Now, I was going to make this book an affiliate link, but because I want you all to be able to fully trust my recommendations, I decided not to do that. So if you want to support me and help me make this my full-time career, the best way is via my Patreon link in the description. And if you're interested in other strategies for more effective communication, definitely check out this video, which summarizes some of the findings in the book, How Minds Change. And shout out to Ryan O'Neill, Tom Eisenbeiss, NetBase News, Monstar, David Yastrzemski, and Maxwell Edison.